Show of hands, how many people here understand or are involved with digital advertising in the space? Okay, so a few. Alex, obviously. So Alex has obviously set me up very well here. So what I want everyone in the room to just understand here is effectively think about the relationship between the buyer and the seller in advertising and how over the last 20 years that relationship has changed, right? So back in the early 2000s when I started, people used to buy TV, print, outdoor, and that relationship was was a very one-to-one relationship. We then got into digitization in the early 2000s, and then in 2010 we moved towards a world of automation. It's called programmatic, which essentially means to automate the process. And what happened there was I didn't need to speak to a seller anymore. I could effectively transact digitally through an exchange. And what effectively happened there is we created the monster that essentially that's there now. So state of the market. Mark Pritchard is the CMO of P&G. He's a big advocate. He talks a lot at conferences, and he talks about the supply chain. Fundamentally, advertising is a very fragmented supply chain, and it is very murky, partly because of the way it's been built, right? So programmatic advertising, so automated advertising, which started around 2010, was fundamentally born broken, right? So we created it as an industry. We created a very, very complicated process with ad exchanges, verification vendors, brand safety vendors, publishers. The whole ecosystem was essentially born broken. And Mark Pritchard talks about this now, that we're essentially running through a very antiquated media buying system right now, which wasn't really designed, or hasn't been properly designed for the world that we live in today, right? So this is the advertising. This is the programmatic ecosystem. So this is called the Lumascape. It's pretty much out of date as soon as it's published. But you can see between the marketeer and the consumer, you can see the number of different technologies that are essentially involved, right? You've got everything from agencies, agency trading desks, verification vendors, data management platforms, lots of acronyms over there that essentially are. These are all parts of our ecosystem, right? The size of this market is $229 billion, right? And it's growing, as Alex alluded to before. The digital advertising marketplace is growing rapidly. Yes, Facebook and Google, they make up around probably 50% of the space. It's the duopoly, but there are a number of other newspaper publishers and magazines and multiple other digital publishers out there that are looking to try and create a better supply chain. So there's a lot of wastage in this ecosystem, and a lot is lost to fraud and bad practices. So if you go back to my original statement around the changing technology. So in 2008, it was a managed service era, the control era, the algorithms and machine era. So this is what's happened recently, where we now start to have automated algorithms and AI that are deciding what ads to show to what users in real time. And then you've got the blockchain piece. So if you think about how financial markets were set up, right? So I started life as a trader in the city. So I used to trade oil. And if you think about how that process was, it was an oil floor where there was people shouting and open outcry, right? And I could see who I was selling my derivatives to, right? Exactly the same in digital advertising. That whole process and that relationship's fundamentally changed. So what happened when they transitioned from floor-based trading to screen-based trading? You still had to go through a process of verification. In the world of advertising, we never had that. In 2010, when the relationship changed between the buyer and the seller, what happened was that everything just moved onto this programmatic screen. There was no barriers to entry. There was no verification. Alex alluded to essentially a regulatory framework, which is self-regulatory. So as a publisher, I could say, my inventory is safe, this is my inventory, and there was no one that was verifying that, right? So what should we have learned? We should have created an ecosystem that was based on the financial markets that essentially had a governance structure in place and a little bit higher barriers to entry. So how do we fix it? Well, blockchain, everyone talks about blockchain. Everyone talks about blockchain being the thing that will solve it. It's impossible to go back and put everything into a box. So blockchain, in my view, enables that to happen. So don't take my word for it, right? Blockchain adoption, if you look at the relative view if you think about how TV, there are massive challenges around cost and speed. So I think the fastest you said was 1,400 Ripple. Zilliqa claims 2,500. Just to give you a sense, an average bidding platform in programmatic advertising today runs at 1.5 million queries per second, right? So that is the delta difference that we need to fix, right? Privacy management, GDPR, all of those things. Today in blockchain, if you write everything to blockchain, everyone can see it. Unilever don't want Procter & Gamble seeing what they're paying for advertising, right? So there's another big challenge there. And then the scalability piece, right? How do you actually scale this from a data standpoint? You've got multiple partners and players in the ecosystem. So there are about 149, or to be exact, advertising solutions in blockchain. There needs to be a single protocol that is used for digital advertising, and all the other businesses can essentially sit around the outside of that and work together. So finally, just quickly, so blockchain, everybody and all the major advertisers on the planet, from P&G to Unilever to Pfizer, are all looking at blockchain. They've all got blockchain working groups. There's a few of them have started to test stuff, but fundamentally, in 2019, you're going to start to see a number of these players start to jump in, right? There'll be new technology companies. Like, who would have thought Accenture would basically be a digital agency, right? So there's a number of different players that will emerge. Crypto and tokens will be experimented with in advertising, but I think that's a couple of years away. There's an education process that needs to happen around the payment structure and how crypto can solve that. And blockchain, I think, fundamentally will create new advertising models. There'll be a whole bunch of new blockchain-based advertising platforms that will come out as the technology proliferates. But this is a long game. It's not a tomorrow. This will take a couple of years as the industry starts to develop and go from there. Okay? Thank you very much for listening to me, and have a good day.